Welcome to the Ruchenlaufer podcast for this new edition. Today we have the privilege of receiving not only an old friend of over 15 years, but also a true innovator, a true forward thinker, Sundeep Waslekar, who was born and who lives in Mumbai, India. For a long time, he has been running the strategic foresight group, Think Forward. But Sundeep has not only been a scholar studying the world politics, he has in particular published landmark studies on the cost of conflicts in various parts of the world, including in the Middle East, coming to the conclusion that it would be much cheaper to find peace than to continuing the conflicts, of course. But he has also been actively involved in mediation efforts, in particular regarding water management and transboundary water management. He is the inventor of the concept of blue peace, meaning peace around water, which has found recognition at the United Nations. Most recently, he has published a book, A World Without War, which has found a great recognition throughout the world with over 3,000 articles, if I'm not mistaken. And plus, Sundeep, I think you had the opportunity to present your book in many, many places, including the French Academy, for instance, and other official places, and also at the UN. So maybe we will start by asking you, Sundeep, if you can summarize what is the main purpose and the main message of your latest book.
Thank you, Jadaniel. Thank you, David. It's a great pleasure to join you on this podcast. Thank you for asking me about my book, A World Without War. It's published by HarperCollins India in English at the end of 2022. Came out in French by CNRS Edition as Entre Guerres Paix in 2023. And I'm happy to announce that it's coming out in Spanish in September this year as Un Mundo Sin Guerra, and being published by Knola Editores in Madrid and will be launched in Madrid on the 10th of September. The book basically says that we are in the most dangerous phase in the history of Homo sapiens. Ever since Homo sapiens appeared on the earth 200,000 years ago, the current period is the most dangerous. We are very, very close to the risk of sleepwalking into a global war, a global nuclear war, either by intent or by incident or by accident. We are giving up the control of humanity over machines. We are allowing artificial intelligence and algorithms to decide the future of humankind, to decide the questions of life and death. And we must retract from the precipice. And if we have to retract from the precipice, we must remember the question that Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell asked, that we must end the war, otherwise we will end human race. What do we want? And if we want to end war, rather than ending human race, then how do we go about it? And the book presents a blueprint for multilateral governance, a way that can create sustainable. It introduces the concept of global social contract. So Rousseau introduced social contract in 1762. In fact, on his experience of Geneva, where you spend a lot of time. And I have proposed that the time has now come from social contract, which he had framed in the context of city-states and nation-states, so global social contract. It proposes a new kind of politics, and it proposes consideration of new philosophies. Some philosophies coming from the eastern part of the world, like Ubuntu in Africa, Vasudeva Kutumbakam in India, Chikyu Minzu Kushigu in Japan. So it basically calls for a new mindset and a new approach to the governance of the world and to the relations between people and nations.
This is a fascinating program for the future. When you look at the situation today with with Donald Trump, who has a very erratic and transactional diplomacy, who is not interested in multilateral affairs at all, who believes probably the world can be run by the US, China, and Russia, the US being the predominant power. When you see most countries, including Western countries, including Europe, heavily in armaments, when you see intelligence, artificial intelligence, penetrating in all aspects of our lives, are we not going exactly in the other direction than the one you suggest?
So, Daniel, this is a very interesting question. What you described just now, a race to rearm ourselves and our race to destroy our. This is the race which is being driven by the ruling elite of most countries in the world. US, Europe, Russia, China, other parts of Asia. But let's keep in mind that this is a race which is engineered by the rulers and by the governments and by the political decision makers. This is not necessarily a proposition that all the populations accept.
Could you
Populations may be not articulating their opposition to it. So I would say the populations, people, the public opinion, they are confused. So
Yes.
there are some people who think that you must go in the way that our leaders are telling them to go, the way NATO, Donald Trump, Mark Rutte, Putin, and those people are telling you to go. And there are some people who are thinking, oh, but we voted Donald Trump because he promised us disengagement of the US from all wars.
Yes.
And there are people in Germany and France who don't want Berlin and Paris and London to be potential targets of Putin's nuclear bombs. So public opinion is confused, and this is exactly the time when we should offer them an alternative opinion, an alternative narrative for the future.
When you say the world is sleepwalking towards war, it immediately suggests the title of the very famous book about First World War, The Sleepwalkers, where it described Europe literally going into conflict without even really thinking. He refused that interpretation. I think it's a very naive interpretation. I think First World War was bound to happen many years before. The difference that exists between this first world conflagration and today is that back in 1914, populations were not educated. And the rulers, at least for Europe, were absolute rulers. They were emperors and kings. They couldn't care less about the populations. Today is expected around 2030, the whole of the world population will be literate. Doesn't that change a lot in the face of the madness of Trump, of Putin, of Erdogan? I live in Serbia, Vucic and everything. Doesn't that all create a completely new set of circumstances?
David, it potentially changes the game. It doesn't automatically change the game. It potentially changes. Because finally, it's the same people who are elected, Putin and Erdogan and everybody else. And of course, Trump and some of the European leaders, the Danish prime minister. So they have elected them. But they elected with a very different kind of a hope. And I say it potentially changes because people are not really clear about what's happening. Some of them think that, these warmongers are right. Some of the Europeans they really feel that Putin is going to attack from Poland to Portugal. There are some people in Asia who feel that China might attack Taiwan. But there are others who see that this is impossible, that Putin could not even cross the Dnieper River. Where is he going to go to Portugal? So some people can see the reality of it. So people are confused. And precisely because their education, their awareness, their access to communication can potentially change their mindset. This is the time for the leaders of Europe and the leaders of other parts of the world who want a better world, who want survival of humanity, who want prosperity of humanity, to show courage, to mobilize their voices, to mobilize their followers, and show a new direction to the world. precisely because potentially there is hope.
If I understand correctly, what you are saying is that you count on the mobilization of the civil society, the people, of the public opinion, which is like the civil society to me, to tell to the leader or to change the leaders, or to tell to their leaders, to force their leaders or to change the leaders, so that instead of going into more confrontation, they go into more cooperation to face the threats which are coming to. Am I correct? Is it my right understanding? Because the question you can ask is, when you see all the leaders of Europe who are telling their populations, we have to fear Russia. And it works. They have very powerful instruments of information. To a big part, it works. So how to change the discourse would probably mean changing leaders. I must say, in Europe, we don't see many political parties who have a very different discourse and who would apply a discourse of cooperation with Russia today, when the mood is we have to rearm, we have to face Russia, Russia is threatening us. As you said, this may be absurd, but this is the official policy. And at the end of the day, those who define those policies are also those who control the money flows. And if they decide to invest, as is the case now in Europe, 500 billion euros into a new armament race, who are ready to spend between 3 and 5% of their GDP on armaments, it would need a sea change, very strategic political changes to reverse this very dangerous trend.
Jordania, let me give you an example. We were at the height of Cold War in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States. He introduced the concept of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to militarize, or even more strongly militarize than what it was the United States. But some people showed courage. Randolph Forsberg, no fame or no name at that stage. She was a researcher in SIPRI in Stockholm. She went back to New York. She organized civil society. She got more than 1 million people on the streets of New York. And then some of the congressmen and senators started changing their minds. And at the same time, there were 3 movies which were produced by filmmakers. One of them was The Day After, and Reagan saw this movie. So with the pressure of the peace movement that Forsberg and others had organized, and the impact of these 3 movies, including The Day After, Ronald Reagan started rethinking. And then in 1986, offered Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik a proposal to abolish nuclear weapons in 10 years' time. This agreement fell through at the last minute, very last minute. In the talks, Reagan insisted on Star Wars, and in a short-sighted manner, Gorbachev said that he wouldn't agree to the nuclear proposal if Star Wars was not abolished. So it fell through. But the point is, after that, INF followed, after that whole arms control process followed, and what were 70, 80,000 nuclear warheads now are down to 10,000, which are still dangerous. But Ronald Reagan's change of mind, one of the most hawkish presidents of the United States, that if civil society, if common people, they gather the courage, if filmmakers, they gather the courage, you can impact. Take another example in Europe. You had Alexander Vucic, who was a great follower of Milosevic. After Milosevic got a bad name and was punished by the International Criminal Court, Vucic changed his mind and he created a moderate party. After he became the president, and he thought now the hardline can sell, he again became a hardliner. He again became hawkish. So the politicians are just blowing with the wind. If they think that peace can sell, they will be the sellers of peace. If they think that animosity and hatred can sell, they will sell animosity and hatred. And the swing of Vucic, one day Milosevic, another day moderation, another day back to hawkish, shows that you are just responding to your perception of the public opinion and the change of opinion by now this can come from people, but this can also come from some enlightened leaders. For example, Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt, with his austere politics, changed the whole politics of Europe. So you don't know who is the Willy Brandt of today.
Speaking of which, Speaking of which, speaking about flip-flopping and not knowing where we stand, there was 2 days ago a speech by Merz, the chancellor of Germany, which was such a typical example of what is going on today. He had Zelensky in the room and many other leaders, and he said, I have two messages. Putin, we are not afraid of you, and we will never give up. And now I have a message for Washington, D.C. We belong together, never give up on Europe, which is completely contradictory. If you say to Putin, we will never give up, it means you have the means to never give up. But then in 10 seconds there, he says, if we don't have American support, we will give up. And I think this is very much how the world operates today, in this sort of vacuum where people just say things without really even understanding themselves what they mean, and moving closer to the brink of destruction without even quite wanting it or understanding it. Am I correct?
I agree with you, David. And what is the irony? Who is opposing the narrative of Merz? Is Alice Weidel, the ultra-right leader in Germany. She stood up against Merz and she said, look, you are planning to use those long-range missiles. They cannot be exported to Ukraine and shot from there. You're probably going to use the German soil, and you're going to make the German soil a potential target for the Russian missiles. So you now have, of all the people, AFD as a peacemonger. Same way in your country, in Switzerland, you have parts of SVP who are the right wing, who talk about peace, but only peace with Ukraine, not peace with Gaza. Yeah, it's very simple.
Always.
So if you look at these trends, what do we observe? I would say we are as humanity facing three crises. One is the ethical crisis or moral crisis. The whole concept of good and bad, our whole concept of right and wrong, they are in crisis.
That's ethical.
Ethical crisis, ethical and moral. Second, we are facing conceptual crisis. When we were in the Cold War, it was bad, but conceptually we were clear that the majority of the world was divided and East Bloc and West Bloc, and conceptually, and there was the non-aligned third. So conceptually you were clear. Today you are in a conceptual crisis. Today, a president of the United States wakes up in the morning and says, I'll take over Greenland. Next day he says, I'll punish Panama. Third day he says, I'll punish Canada. These are all his friends over the years, friends of this country. And one day he says, Putin is my friend. Other day he says, he's my enemy. He doesn't listen. I need to send bombs to Ukraine. So, and it's the same with many other leaders. So we are in conceptual crisis. And then we are in technological crisis. Because we are developing technologies like AI, which are in next 3 to 4 years, which will go out of control. That is the direction in which we are going, and we won't know how to control them. So the world is facing this triple crisis, and nobody has a solution. Honestly, I don't have a solution.
Is this similar to 1914?
It is a combination.
These three crises seem to resonate with 1914. All these emperors were cousins. They didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, they felt developing this mass army with machine guns and heavy artillery, which was completely new. And they didn't have quite a project. This seems to be resonating.
David, I think it's at the same time similar to the period of 1911 to 1914, and also similar to the period of 1931 to 1935. Okay, at the same time. So we are approaching the Third World War, carrying the signatures of the First World War as well as the Second World War. So what was happening before the First World War? In simple terms, Britain and Germany were involved in a huge race, which was symbolized by the naval race. Both sides wanted to bring the strongest navy ever. Similarly, US and China, perhaps China with Russia, are involved in a big race, and this time it is the AI race, and AI combined with other technologies. And so they want to build the strongest AI ever, the most powerful AI, just as the Brits and the Germans wanted. And so there was a race there. The similarity with, and so you don't want the other side to take an ascendancy over, and you want to do everything possible to undermine the other side. And the similarity with the 1930s is that we had the tariff war, and then we had the trade war, and we had the bigger than ever. which led to depression and which eventually led to the rise of Hitler. And again, now Trump is trying to engineer a tariff war. He's not succeeded greatly so far, but he's trying to engineer. He's trying. Every day he wakes up. I've even lost the count of how many different kinds of tariffs he announces on different countries. And then after 2 days, he changes his mind, and third day he got some another set of tariffs. You don't even know. But now we are entering, and then even Brazil said, if you launch tariffs, you will launch counter tariffs. So now we are getting into a trade war, and the Chinese have announced that they will perhaps be little mild on the tariffs, but they will stop the export of rare earth elements. So rare earth minerals, if they are stopped, your entire transition to the green economy and to some of the electronics is stopped. Like the 11 to 14 period, we are in this competitive spirit, and like the 30s, we are in the trade war and tariff war. And so we are carrying the combination of the footprints of two world wars going towards the third war.
You talk about artificial intelligence, and I think in your book you are also saying, and in your speeches, the use of artificial intelligence in nuclear weapon systems is a huge threat, because it's very much likely in a not distant future, an immediate future, there will be no human intervention or no human decision in the launch of a nuclear weapon. Are we so far? Is there a way out? What do you think, Sundeep? How can we prevent that machines decide on launching a nuclear war and therefore putting an end probably to mankind?
John Daniel, that's not scientifically correct. I will explain what's the correct position. The launch function of nuclear weapons is very much in the human hands in all the big nuclear powers, and it will remain so. But what is important, and that is why the P5 countries say they don't need to do much, because the command function is in the human control. But let me tell you the truth. That's true about command function. But the command function is guided by decision support system, which is really the early warning system. And the early warning system is driven by artificial intelligence. So it's the artificial intelligence which informs the commanders who are in charge of the launch function. Currently, there is about a 15-minute time. The early warning system informs the launch commanders that some enemy missiles are coming, and the launch commander has to take a decision along the chain right up to the president of the country. 15 minutes. During that 15 minutes, he has to verify the threat and take a decision. This time, next 3 to 4 years, will shrink to 5 minutes. So in 5 minutes, you will have to take a decision. So the launch will be in human hands, but those humans will be under pressure from artificial intelligence to take a decision based on the information they are providing. Now, what is worse? The early warning system is also dependent on the cyber technology, and the new artificial intelligence models which are being developed or being already developed, will be capable of intrusion in the cyber wall, and they can play havoc with the early warning system. So basically, the cyber defenses will melt down, and this is a worry they all have now. So that is from nuclear weapons. So in 5 to 7 years now, we run a risk of a nuclear war triggered by artificial intelligence, not by taking over the launch functions, manipulating the people who are in charge of the launch functions.
The data and the perception of the people
and the information, and the advice that artificial intelligence will give, and they will have only 5 minutes. In 5 minutes in the tense environment, they will have to decide. But let me just add something else about artificial intelligence. That's about nuclear weapons. AI has already developed, as of 13 July 2025, already, not in future, blueprints or capacity to enable any person, any terrorist sitting in any cave, to develop or to create a biological weapon or a chemical weapon. That capacity already AI has. It's controlled, it's being monitored, but it can come out of it can do a jailbreak anytime. So AI already has that capacity, and when the terrorists will require, or a rogue army will require the material, is on the server. It's not giving you the weapon. but it will give you a detailed formula of how to make that weapon sitting somewhere. And if you can get hold of, you'll be able to produce biological and chemical weapon. And before you know, there might be a biological bomb in South Bombay or in Zurich near the railway station, and it can kill not the whole humanity, but it can kill 50,000, 100,000 people and cause havoc. And the third, which is even worse, is that AI models, without any reference to either nuclear weapon or biological or other weapons of mass destruction, they are going in the direction of automacity. They are becoming more and more autonomous and going out of human control. So AI slowly is being able to replicate itself. So AI is trying to write its own code, AI code.
So
it will then be able to take over the machine, and we are few years away from that.
But so what you're saying right now is that if I were to ask you what are the biggest threats right now in facing humanity, like Ukraine or Gaza or any such China and Taiwan, you would say none of it. The main issue is technology.
It's a question of either misusing technology or the technology acting on its own in the context of a conflict like Ukraine or Gaza or China or whatever. It's in that context. Because see, the technology or weapon doesn't shoot on its own. We have to keep in mind, weapon doesn't kill anybody on its own. So it's the human beings who decide to use those weapons, and they use weapons to annihilate, to kill, or to destroy. So in the end, it's a human being. So there'll be few human beings who can take the decision. But we are going in the direction that in next couple of years or 3 or 4 years, it's not the military commanders who will take that decision, that the technology itself will be able to take the decision. And this can happen by incident or by accident. And we still have time to restrain this technology. That is
Okay,
all the scientists in the world, all those people who developed AI, all of those who got Nobel Prize in physics, chemistry, they are all asking for measures to restrain the AI technology. And currently there are some ways to restrain if there is a big global agreement.
Okay. Can we come back to one of the things you said at the beginning and the discussion we had about ethics also? I think you said at the beginning that we have to get inspired by African, Indian, Japanese philosophical traditions who could help us create a better world or maybe confront the threats you just exposed. Could you tell us more about those philosophies, those ethical concepts that you have mentioned?
The Southern African philosophy says, I am because we are. So I don't exist if we don't exist. I am because we are, or I am because you are. I don't exist if you don't exist. So once you assimilate that, then you look for existence of us, not just me. That's the Southern African philosophy. The Indian philosophy, Sudeva Kutumbakam, means the Vasudha. Vasudha is the earth, the world, is one family. Chikyu Menzo Kushigi, the Japanese philosophy, means the earth or the world is one nation. And there is a Chinese philosophy, Tianxia, which means also the world is one nation. Oriental philosophies believe in the integrity of humanity. Of course, it doesn't mean that the Southern African, Indian, or Japanese have not been involved in warfare. Of course, they have been involved in violation of their own philosophy, but it doesn't make the philosophy itself invalid. What I'm saying is that we have to consider these philosophies as well. Western model is very much based on the principles of French Revolution, liberty, equality, solidarity. And that is very important. And we don't have to renounce it. But as the world gets more complex, we have to look at more and more ways to try to deal with the complexity of our time.
If I have to put like a very simple question, how likely is it for you that in coming 10 years, there is a major world conflagration, whether it is nuclear or not?
I would say that in the next 10 years, we run a very high risk of a global catastrophic war. Very high risk. No, more than that. I would say I would say the risk of a global catastrophic war is 70-80%. The risk of a global nuclear war is maybe 10%. And the risk of total annihilation of humanity and the end of the project of human civilization is definitely at least 1%. So when Oppenheimer was asked, when he did the Trinity test, that what is the threshold beyond which we should not test the nuclear weapons, it was 3 in a million. So that is the Oppenheimer threshold. If I am saying today that the risk of a nuclear war is say even 3%, it's huge as compared to the Oppenheimer threshold, manifold of the Oppenheimer threshold. Now, Elon Musk, leave aside his politics and leave aside some of his assertions, has been repeatedly saying that the risk of computers or autonomous machines taking over humanity is significant. And a few months ago, he was speaking in Saudi Arabia, and he said it's more than 10%. And this is Elon Musk who is involved in this process.
We have the feeling as common people to be the spectators of a kind of theater play where you have alpha males, actually, because we have almost only women, except maybe Mrs. Yin, who are playing with the future, with our future, with the future of mankind. Now we talk a lot about Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, about Modi, about Rutte, a little bit less about Merz and Macron. What about all the other states? At the end of the day, we are talking about what? A small percentage of the number of states, even if it's a high percentage of the world population of the world GDP. But we have many states, and Switzerland has always been trying to mend fences between conflicting parties. There are many other states. We remember the non-aligned movement in the 60s and 70s, which was not very strong. All the countries which were part of the non-aligned movement then have a better economy now, maybe a better government system, more charisma, more soft power in today's world. Is there a role or a mission outside of the big powers who are in competition for smaller powers, small and medium powers in the world, try to prevent these catastrophes from happening, and how to do that?
Jordanel believes that there is a role for neutral powers, middle powers, or smaller powers play a role of active neutrality to help the world come out of the crisis. I would even go one step ahead, and I would say that this is the only instrument that can take the world out of the crisis. And because I'm making such a strong statement, let me explain. The first ever blueprint for global governance was written by Émeric Crousset, French scholar. It was published in 1623. So even before the concept of nation state was born, much before the French Revolution, Émeric Crousset, a French scholar, wrote a thesis on how the world should be governed and how the nations should relate to. Émeric Crousset inspired Abbé de Saint-Père, and Abbé de Saint-Père inspired Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant is a disciple of Émeric Crousset, but Kant became famous, and Crousset has been forgotten. Now Crousset presented a whole structure, a blueprint. You must get his book. It's in French. You read French, so you must get it. Now Crousset,
that are actively dangerous. I think this is an excellent conclusion to this podcast. Very articulate and very easy to understand. We have to wake up as common citizens, as smaller countries with little or no armies, and stand up to these thugs and refuse their narrative and prevent big mistakes.
Exactly, the power to the people. Well, we will have a test sometime in the next 12 to 18 months in Switzerland. Still very uncertain what is going to happen there. Thank you so much. It has been a very innovative and refreshing way to look at the current situation. And also, you have given us a roadmap, especially as Swiss people, especially as somebody who is involved in the neutrality. Our Geneva Center for Neutrality, which I have founded last year, has just organized a colloquium in Geneva with 90 representatives from 27 states. So I see that there is a very strong interest. Well, let's make out of these little waves. Thank you very much, Sundeep,
Thank
for
you.
your inspiration.
Exactly. Thank you very much.